Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets project in Practical Sheets. Today we're going to do a multi-level dropdown. I mean that I'm going to have dependent dropdowns in as many categories as I want. For example, I have this data where I have some suites, Google and Microsoft Office, and inside each suite I have some tools, and inside each tool I have some categories, and inside each category I have some subcategories. And this I could have, in my case I have 4, but you could have 8 or 20 depending on your business, on your project. So the idea is that each of these tools correspond to each of these suites, and then each of these categories correspond to each of these tools, and so on and so on. So once I do the dropdown, for example, here I'll choose Microsoft Office, then it appears automatically the tools, only the tools that apply to Microsoft Office. So for example, I choose Teams, and then it will choose only the categories that apply to Teams. And then if I choose this category, then it will bring the subcategories that apply only to this category. And again, you could do it for as many columns as you want. I did a very simple code that will be useful for as many columns as you want, as long as they're one next to each other. And that the order here corresponds to the order here. This is the only restriction. We could see in further videos how to change this, but this is the way we're doing it today. So I know you love it, but before starting, I want to invite you to my Patreon page or to practicalsheets.com, where you'll find the templates for these and the more than 50 videos in the channel and exclusive courses in Google Forms, Google Sheets, and much, much more. If not, you can just subscribe and this will be support enough. Thank you so much, and let's continue with our video. Let's begin. So I have my data organized in the following way. I have a table with 4 categories or 4 columns. Each category deep dives in the category to the left. So for example, if here I have my category Google, here I have in the second column in each row of Google, I will have a tool that corresponds to Google. And then if I move one column to the right and I have my category, each category will correspond to the tool to the left, and each tool will correspond to a suite to the left, and the same for this subcategory. So when I'm talking about this sum subcategory, I'm saying that this sum corresponds to the category functions, to the tool sheets, to the suite Google. So that when I do my dropdown, first I'm going to do the dropdown of only these two, and if I select, for example, Excel, I will have these 2 categories, and when I select one of the categories, I will only have the subcategories that are here to the right. So here the order doesn't matter, but I wanted to order it like this so that you get a better sense of how it will work. But the code does not depend on this being ordered, okay? This is important to know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these dropdowns in the same order. So this is important for you to know. This code will work if you have the dropdowns in the same order and without intermediate columns. Then we could do some modifications in the future so that we could be a bit more flexible. But what I want to do in this time is that I could have 3, 4, 5, 8 multiple dropdowns, and that this function will work for as many as you want, as long as they are one next to the other. So the first thing we're going to do is to this first suite, we're going to define it manually. How? With data validation. We're going to select list from a range, and then we're going to select this range. We're going to start in A2, and here right column, and then A, so that it chooses all the rows. We can say reject input and save. And we're going to duplicate this with Ctrl Shift down and then Ctrl D so that we have it in all of our rows. So you can see that even though in this range we have duplicates and we have empty rows, here it'll only bring the data without repeating itself. Now it comes the interesting part. So let's go to extension subscript. Let's call this dropdown for now. And the first thing I always need to do in my dropdowns is to know where the user is located. This I can do it in various ways. The one I like the most is this spreadsheet app.getActiveRange. we are going to store this in a variable called active cell. Okay, now there's other information I'm going to need about this active cell. For example, in which column am I and in which row am I? So there are some methods that help me with this. Active cell, get row for the row, and active cell, get column for my columns. And let's store them in their own variables. Active row and active column. I may also need the value of this. So this I can get it with its stories in active value. It will be active cell dot get value. And finally, I may need the sheet in which the user is, because if I have 3, 4, 5 sheets, I need to make sure that I'm in the correct sheet to apply my dropdown. So this would be active sheet, and this will be active cell dot get sheet. Okay, now I need to know where I'm going to apply my dropdown, and it depends on all these 4 variables. So the first one will be the sheet. So we're going to do a conditional. We're going to look for the sheet name, because here we have the sheet but not the name. So for the name, I need to go further with this get name, and we're going to compare it to the name we want. In this case, I want it to be in this dropdown sheet. So let's say equal to dropdown. It needs to be in the sheet called dropdown. Okay, this is the first condition I need. The second condition I need is that the row is greater than 1, because I don't want this to damage my headers by accident. So the second condition will be that the active row is greater than 1. And finally, and this will be the most important one, because this is where we can have multiple dropdowns. For now, we're going to do just for this one, and then we're going to expand it. So we're going to say that the column needs to be the column 3. So active column should be 3. Okay, that's it. So for now, let's see if it's working just for the rows I want. We're going to do spreadsheet up dot get active spreadsheet, and let's toast something. Toast. We're good. In order for this to work, I need to put this inside a simple trigger, and the simple trigger will be this onEdit. So we're going to place this drop-down function inside an onEdit. Let's say it's a good practice to save this project. Let's test it. So if I write something here, nothing should happen. If I put something here, nothing should happen. If I change something here in my header, nothing should happen. If I do a change in this row 3, but in this data, nothing should happen. But if I change, for example, this one, then you can see we're good, because we're going to apply our code just to all this range up to the last row, to this range. Only when this is changed, my drop-down function will work. Okay? Okay, so now I will only be worried about what I'm right here inside. So the first thing we're going to do, we already have the value, so this is good. But what I'm going to do is, depending on what the user writes here, for example, selects here, for example, Google, then I'm going to go here and filter all the rows that have Google, and then I'm going to bring just this second column is the one I need for the tool column. Okay? So how do we filter? First, we're going to get all the data in this data sheet. How do we do this? There are multiple ways. So we're going to create a variable WS. It's normally called, but you can call it however you want, worksheet if you want. And then here we're going to connect with our active document or active spreadsheet. Then we're going to have a spreadsheet. Again, it's normally called SS, but just for you to know, this is a spreadsheet. And this will be my worksheet. And I'm going to connect with a specific sheet. So it's not getActiveSheet, but getSheet by name. And the name in my case is data. And finally, I'm going to connect to my data. This I do it with spreadsheet dot get. There are many ways, but I like to use this get data range, that it works for tables. So it's going to choose all the table. It starts in A1 and will go right to the last column and down to the last row. And this is the data it's going to bring. And finally, I'm going to bring the values. So this is an array of arrays where I get all my data. Given that I'm going to filter it, I don't need to remove the header, so there's no problem with that. So what I need to do is a filter. How do I do this? I'm going to data.filter. So I'm going to filter my data. This is an arrow type callback function. So for each row, it's going to look for a condition. In this case, the condition is that the first element of each row, so this is row in the position 0. I assume you know something about arrays. If not, well, just you need to know that arrays start in the position 0. So if we have this array, that is the row, then this will be the position 0, this is the 1, this is the 2, and this number 3. So given that I need to filter by my suite, that is this one, then I'm going to give position 0. And the condition is that row 0 needs to be same to this value. Okay, perfect. But now, so this, in my example of Google, it will take this whole range and just transform it into this one. But what I really need is just this. I only need the second column. That, remember that in array notation is column is position 1. So what I can do is, after doing my filter, I can do a map function where I take again each row and I'm going to convert it into another thing. And what I'm going to convert it is to the column number 1, because this is all I need. And let's store this in a variable called list. For now, I'm going to log the data and log the list so that you see it in a more clear way. Let's save. And for example, choose here Microsoft Office. Let's go to our executions. I have an error. This is not value, but active value. My fault. Again, save. And let's choose here again, Google. Let's go here. It's not failing, but I want to see the logs. Okay. So you can see that data is all of this, all my table. But then I brought finally the list that I need, that is this one. And this is what I'm going to put in my dropdown. So now we're going to create a data validation. How do we do this? Spreadsheet app dot new data validation. So we need to say which type of data validation I want, and it will be this. In our case, it will be required value in list. So required value in list will need an array that I've already created with this list. And finally, I could give some options here. For example, set that I'm not going to allow invalid. This is that it's, if I put something that is not in the list, it won't allow it. So let's put this false. And finally, let's build it with the build function. And let's store this in a variable called validation. And now we need to put this validation somewhere. So in our case, we're going to put the validation in the cell to the right of our active cell. So we're going to say active cell.offset we're going to move 0 rows and 1 column to the right. And here we're going to create our validation. We're going to set data validation, and we're going to set the validation we just created. And that's it. It should work. Let's see. And let's try it here. So here you can see that after choosing Google, it will bring my Google form, my Google tools. And if I choose Microsoft Office here, then it will also bring the corresponding data. Okay? So now what I wanted to do is that this works not only here, but also here. That when I choose sheets, it also works here. And when I choose category, it also works here. So this is the main challenge for today. So basically, the problem lies in connecting the active column to the rows in my data. That's it. So for example, knowing that this column 3 refers to this column 1. This column 4 refers to this column 2, and so on and so on. So how do we transform this so that there's a relation between the place where the column is in the dropdown and the place where the data is in the other sheet? For example, we have suite here, that is column C, and here suite is column A. So it would be to subtract, and column C is column number 3 in my code. So if I subtract 2, then I have column 1. But remember that we're talking about arrays, so I need the position 0, so I need to subtract 1 more. So it will be -3. And in the case of my dropdown, that is always 1 to the right, so I wouldn't need to subtract 3, but subtract 2. I know this is a bit complicated maybe to grasp, so let's see if it works first. So here, instead of 0, I'm going to put active column -3. And here, instead of 1, I'm going to put active column -2. Let's see if it continues to work. Let's save. And to Google again. And it works. Okay, but now I need for it to work for these 4. So what I'm going to do is to put that this is it doesn't have to be equal to 3, but greater than 3, greater or equal than 3, the column, and active column should be less or equal than, this is 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then 6. So apparently this should work now for all the dropdowns. So let's save. Let's see. Google. It's working. Sheets. It's working. Functions. It's working. Okay. This works because here I'm bringing all the functions. So by chance, I have functions in Sheets and I have functions in Excel. So this will work if everything is unique, if there is no repetition between categories. So if I know that each category is unique, so that I don't repeat functions for Google and functions for Office, that is functions for Sheets and functions for Excel, then we won't have a problem and it will work perfect. So I will leave this small problem for a next video. So I chose the worst of it. Now let's say tools. Tools, it only brings the tools for Sheets. And in Office, if I choose Teams, then I have the categories of Teams, and then I have the subcategories of meetings. Okay, so other than that small problem, then everything works fine. Actually, here I have a mistake. Let's see. The column actually shouldn't be until this one, but until 1 before 5, because it shouldn't work here in subcategory because I don't have any more dropdowns. So this should be until 5. So it will work in 3, in 4, and in 5. Here, here, and here. Okay, so let's try it again. Perfect. So it's working. Just want to fix one thing. And what happens, for example, if I edit this. Then it should also delete this and maybe even take the data validation. Okay? So I know it's not perfect. There are some other things we could fix. For example, when I start deleting, there are no errors and all that, but we can leave this for another video. For now, I think the interesting thing about this is that if we have it one in front of the other, I could have here 20 dropdowns, and it's not a problem. You just need to change this to the appropriate column and make sure that this conversion is done right. This is the trick. In my case, the conversion is -3 because this column converts to this column -1, taking into account that we're talking about arrays. Okay? So this is it. I hope you like it. I hope it's useful. And if enough people like it, then we could do a second part to address some of the mistakes, errors, and possibilities. If you like it, then you can head over to the Patreon page or to practicalsheets.com, where you'll find the templates. Or if you subscribe, you'll have the templates for these and more than 60 videos that I have in the channel, as well as some courses I'm preparing, Google Sheets, Google Apps Script, Google Forms, and much, much more. Thank you so much, and see you next time.